We like to believe that power is just a tool, something leaders use and then walk away from. But there's a psychological threshold, one that political scientists call the point of no return, where a leader stops governing a system and starts becoming it. The psychologist Erich Fromm called this the escape from freedom, the moment a population surrenders its judgment entirely to a single figure. But Fromm never answered the harder question: what happens to the man on the other side of that surrender? History gives us one answer unlike anything else. Not a country, not a regime, a controlled psychological environment, engineered from scratch, and at its center, a man who didn't inherit power, he inherited a mythology. This is what we're investigating today. Let's start where most political analysis refuses to go. In 1973, psychologist David Winter published a landmark study on what he called the power motive, the internal drive not just to have influence, but to feel influential. Winter found something that should make us uncomfortable. The higher a leader's power motive score, the more likely they were to engage in military conflict, suppress institutional checks, and take catastrophic risks. Not because they were irrational, because the psychological reward of dominance becomes structurally addictive. Behavioral neuroscience backs this up directly. Studies show that social dominance activates the same dopaminergic pathways as substance dependency. The more unchallenged a power, the higher the dose required to feel the same effect. Now ask yourself a different question. What happens when a system is designed from the ground up to give one man unlimited, uncontested dominance from birth? North Korea didn't happen by accident. The system was architected deliberately and methodically by Kim Il-sung beginning in the late 1940s. The official ideology is called Juche. Most analysts translate it as self-reliance and move on. That's a mistake. Juche is not an economic philosophy. It's not even really a political one. It is a theological framework wearing the costume of a political ideology. Under Juche, the leader isn't the head of state. He is the brain of the social organism. The population, in official state language, are his arms and legs, not citizens, not even subjects, extensions of a single body. This framing was borrowed deliberately from biological language because biological systems don't debate their brain. They don't vote against it. They don't defect. They obey it. By the time Kim Jong-il consolidated power in the 1990s, 3 generations of North Koreans had been raised inside this framework, embedded through education, architecture, art, music, and daily ritual. The system wasn't just political control, it was the re-engineering of psychological reality. Kim Jong-un was approximately 27 years old when he assumed control of one of the most militarized states on Earth. No election, no institutional transition, no conventional legitimacy of any kind. What he had instead was something arguably more powerful, a pre-existing mythology that made his authority feel cosmically inevitable. The official term used in North Korean state documents is Suryong, a Korean word that translates loosely as supreme leader, but carries weight far beyond any political title. Closer in its meaning to a providential guide, a figure whose authority doesn't come from competence or consent, but from something above both. Here's where it gets disturbing. When a system builds that level of mythological legitimacy around a person, not after they take power, but before they're even born, that person doesn't just use the mythology, he becomes trapped inside it. To show weakness is to crack the system. To admit error is to threaten the entire structure. To be visibly human becomes dangerous. So here's what we actually know. We have a 27-year-old inheriting a system that cannot afford to let him be wrong. A population of 26 million people raised over generations to accept that system without question. And a world outside trying to analyze it using normal political frameworks that simply don't apply. Because this isn't just politics, this is something else entirely. Investigative journalists and defectors, including testimony compiled by the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea, describe a system operating on three interlocking mechanisms. Mechanism 1, information monopoly. North Korea doesn't just restrict outside information, it constructs an entirely separate informational reality. State media doesn't compete with external sources, it replaces them. Defectors consistently report that their first exposure to outside information wasn't confusing because it was different. It was confusing because reality itself felt wrong. Mechanism 2, surveillance as internalization. The Inmenban system, a neighborhood monitoring structure dividing the population into small units, doesn't just observe behavior. Over time, it reshapes it. When surveillance is constant and lifelong, self-censorship stops being a strategy. It becomes a reflex. People don't suppress dissent, they stop generating it. Mechanism 3, hereditary guilt. The Songbun system classifies citizens based on perceived loyalty across generations. Your grandfather's past determines your present, your access to food, education, housing, opportunity. This isn't just punishment, it's the weaponization of identity itself, making loyalty to the state inseparable from loyalty to your own family. Together, these mechanisms don't just produce obedience, they produce belief, and that distinction changes everything. The findings documented by the United Nations in 2014 were not emotional, they were clinical. Famine used as a structural tool. Between 1994 and 1998, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions, died while the system continued to function. Not as a collapse, but as a controlled condition. Forced labor systems holding tens of thousands, often for crimes of association, not action. Entire families across generations. And the most disturbing impact is the one you cannot see, the psychological cost. Research compiled by the Database Center for North Korean Human Rights shows patterns of trauma that go beyond conventional conflict. Not just fear, but fragmentation of identity itself. Because when reality is constructed for you over a lifetime, escaping the system doesn't just mean leaving a country, it means relearning how to perceive truth. And this leads to the system's most dangerous contradiction. The mythology requires perfection, an infallible leader, a flawless structure, but reality doesn't cooperate. People can be isolated from information, but they cannot be isolated from experience. Hunger cannot be redefined. Suffering cannot be reframed forever. Every system built on total narrative control eventually faces the same fracture, not from external pressure, but from internal dissonance, the moment when lived reality no longer matches the story. The Soviet Union didn't collapse simply because of sanctions. It collapsed because the narrative stopped making sense. North Korea faces the same structural tension, but with one difference. This system was designed from the beginning to delay that collapse, to stretch the gap between narrative and reality as long as possible, through control, through isolation, through psychological engineering. So where does that leave us? With one of the most advanced systems of mass psychological control ever constructed. A system where belief is not optional, where reality is not discovered, it is assigned. And at the center of it, a leader who appears to control everything, but in reality is bound by the very system that created him. Because in a system built on mythology, power is not just maintained, it must be performed, constantly, flawlessly, without interruption. And once that performance becomes necessary, it stops being a role and becomes a prison.